Verb phrases have more complex relationships than noun phrases, so mastering their rules is more challenging. Most verbs are classified as regular and have four forms. The bare infinitive, which is also called the base form, is just the infinitive form without the word to. It's used for the simple present tense. Both the simple past and past participle are formed by adding an ed suffix to the base form. An ing suffix is added to form the present participle, and an s suffix is added to form the simple present for the third person singular. Verbs are classified as irregular if their simple past or past participle forms don't end with the letters ed. Example forms of an irregular verb are speak, spoke, spoken, speaking, and speaks. Irregular verbs can be grouped based on several patterns. These groups are listed in the color-coded grammar charts. There are 10 verbs that use the base form for present, past, and past participle forms. Examples are cost, cut, and put. I call this the triple pattern. There are 2 double patterns. There are only 3 verbs for which the past participle takes the base form. They are become, come, and run. Most irregular verbs take the same form for the simple past and the past participle. However, unlike regular verbs, they don't end with ed. Examples are bought, thought, made, and understood. I have listed 47 of these double patterned verbs in my charts. The other 4 groups all form patterns with the past participle ending with the letter N. Examples from these groups are seen, spoken, shown, and begun. The 11 verbs in this last group are included based on the vowels I, A, and U being used in their present, past, and past participle forms. The forms begin, began, and begun are the only ones ending with an N. Most end with NG or NK. The 2 irregular verbs whose past participles are most commonly incorrectly formed are drunk and swum. Many people form them like the double pattern and say have drank and have swam. This is probably because there is a negative association with the word drunk, and the word swum just sounds odd. It's the only past participle that ends with the letter M. Another common error is the use of seen for both the simple past and the past participle. The simple past form is saw. Auxiliary verbs are classified as modal if they combine with the base form of verbs. There are 9 modal verbs: can, will, shall, would, should, could, may, might, and must. They don't have infinitive forms and they don't take suffixes. Although the auxiliary verb do is combined with the bare infinitive form, it's classified as the helping verb because it also functions as an irregular main verb. There are 11 phrasal modal verbs that also combine with the base form. Some of these have very similar meanings as the 9 modals. Compare he can swim with he is able to swim. We will swim with we are going to swim. I must rest with I have to rest. You should leave with you ought to leave. Used to always refers to the past, as in we used to swim there. ESL students tend to confuse it with being used to something, as in we are not used to the cold weather. Note that all modals have both a meaning related to possibility and a meaning expressing a point of view. Compare we can leave today with you can borrow my car. It will rain tomorrow with will you please be careful? And there shouldn't be any problems with you should wear your seatbelt. Modals and the other auxiliary verbs are said to represent aspects of verbs. These aspects include possibility, completion, duration, and passiveness. Forms of to have express completion, and forms of to be are used for duration and passiveness. When they are combined, they can express multiple aspects of verbs. Examples are didn't study, should have been studying, would have studied, will be sleeping, are being watched. Notice that the auxiliary have is always followed by the past participle form, and be is followed by either the present or the past participle forms. The 16 active voice verb tenses can all be formed with auxiliary verbs, and most of the tenses require auxiliary verbs. This table is one of the free charts available at colorcodedenglish.com. Notice that in addition to the present, past, and future tenses, there is a conditional tense. We form the future tense with will and shall. Verb combinations with the other 7 modals like would and might are classified as the conditional tense. The second column of each of the 4 rows contains the past participle of the main verb. These tenses all express the perfect aspect. The third and fourth columns contain present participles. They are the continuous and perfect continuous tenses. Some grammars call continuous tenses progressive tenses. Notice that 9 of the tenses are shaded with a gray background. They correspond to the 9 passive verb tenses. You will often encounter a rule that advises you to use the active voice whenever you have the option. This is a matter of style rather than grammar. Inappropriate and overuse of the passive voice can lead to unnecessarily complex verb phrases. However, if the active voice is an option, passive tenses are sometimes the best choice for clarity and simplicity. When students are taught the parts of speech, they are often told that verbs represent actions. It's more accurate to say they represent processes. Physical, behavioral, and communicative processes typically are actions. But verbs also represent existential, relational, and mental processes. Verbs like be, contain, and know are not actions. The classification of verbs as dynamic versus stative illustrates this. Dynamic verbs can be used with continuous tenses, but stative verbs cannot. We can say, it is becoming common, but not, they are being students, or I am having gray hair. To plan and to know are both mental processes. We can say, I am planning dinner, but not, I am knowing the answer. Being, having, and knowing are not actions. The present tense of dynamic verbs typically refers to regular actions in the past and future. Consider, she drinks coffee every day. We use the present continuous to say that an action is happening in the present, as in, she is drinking coffee now. However, the simple present of stative verbs primarily refers to the present. If we say, she likes this restaurant, we understand that is her feeling right now. The present tenses of dynamic verbs can also refer to the future. Consider, we are leaving tomorrow. The bus departs at 8 a.m. Adverbs of time are essential for indicating when actions occur. When the modal verb will is used to refer to the future, there can be a subtle difference from what the phrasal modal to be going to implies. Consider, the girls will watch the movie, and the boys are going to watch the movie. Who do you think will watch the movie first? Saying going to implies something will probably happen sooner than saying will. It can also convey greater certainty that something will happen. Compare, we will arrive early with, we are going to arrive early. Both sentences indicate the intention to arrive early, but often we don't have total control over exactly when something will happen until we see that certain hopes and expectations have been realized. The modal shall also refers to the future, although it isn't used as often by Americans as other native speakers. Shall indicates a suggestion or a stronger intention to do something. In the questions, will we discuss it with Bob? And shall we discuss it with Bob? The second question implies the speaker wants Bob's input. The simple past and the present perfect both refer to the past, but there are some subtle differences. Consider why you would say, I have told them the rules, as opposed to, I told them the rules. If students break a rule, you might say, I told them the rules, but maybe they didn't understand them all. Or you could say, I have told them the rules. They know they can't do that. The perfect aspect can indicate consequence for what is now expected, whereas the simple past merely indicates an event has occurred. The simple past also can refer to events in the distant past, while the present perfect includes the past up to the present. A man who says, I worked there for 2 years, probably works somewhere else now. A man who says, I have worked there for 2 years, still works there. Adverbs can also determine whether the simple past or present perfect tense should be used. You might say, I saw that movie yesterday, to indicate you can recommend or criticize it. If you say, I have already seen that movie, it would probably be to let someone know that you don't want to watch it a second time. The present perfect indicates there is some consequence for a past event. The simple past refers to specific points in time. Examples are, I first ate cake on my second birthday, and did you eat pizza last night? The present perfect is nonspecific about when in the past something occurred. Have you ever eaten sushi? The connector since cannot be used with the simple past, but the preposition for can be used with either the past or the perfect aspect. The word since indicates up until the present, while for just indicates a duration of time. We can say, she studied English for 10 years, or she has studied English for 10 years. We cannot say, he lived in LA since 2012, or he was living in LA since he sold his farm. Instead, we use the perfect aspect and say, he has lived in LA since 2012. He has been living in LA since he sold his farm. Besides the adverbs already, ever, and yet, we also use just, lately, and still with the perfect aspect. Most grammar rules for adverbs are relatively flexible. We can actually combine these adverbs with other tenses. However, you can't combine the adverbs yesterday or last night with the perfect tenses. Obviously, we don't use the future tense with the adverb yesterday or the past tense with tomorrow. However, the adverb today can be used with all the tenses. Consider, we swam earlier today. They are swimming today. And today we will watch them swim. You might expect the adverb soon to only be used with the future tense. It is, of course, as in, they will swim soon, but it's also used with the past tense. We soon realized that he couldn't swim. Stories are written in both the past and present tense. Time is relative to the events of the story and not to the listener or the speaker. Another example of an adverb of time that can be used with all tenses is again. Consider, he was late again. If he is late again, the boss is going to punish him again. Adverbs represent characteristics of verbs, and like adjectives, they are grouped by the type of characteristic. Adverbs of degree include intensifiers, amplifiers, downtoners, and limiters. Adverbs of frequency are distinguished from adverbs of time, and adverbs of experience, such as normally and usually, are grouped with frequency adverbs. Note the 5 frequency adverbs in bold text. There are special rules for them. Other subclasses of adverbs are place, manner, comment, coordination, reason, and comparison. Adverbs of degree intensify, quantify, and limit both verbs and adverbs. Other adverbs are classified according to the type of question they answer. For example, frequency adverbs answer how often, and time adverbs answer when. These are points in time. The time in question, how long, is answered with adverbial phrases that refer to time periods. We saw the example for 10 years and since 2012. Place adverbs answer where questions. Manner adverbs answer how questions. And adverbs of reason and purpose answer why questions. All adverbs of reason and purpose are formed by phrases and dependent clauses. There are 3 adverb positions: the beginning or initial position, the middle, and the end. Many adverbs can be placed in all 3 positions. However, some types of adverbs should only be placed in 1 or 2 of the positions. Adverbs of time, place, and reason can be placed in the beginning and the end positions. Adverbs of degree should not be placed in these positions unless they are modifying another adverb. Adverbs of degree, frequency, and comment can always be placed in the middle positions. The main middle position is between the subject and the main verb. There is a secondary middle position for the linking verb to be and for auxiliary verbs. Adverbs in this position are placed between to be and its complement, or between an auxiliary and a main verb. The 5 adverbs of frequency, always, never, rarely, seldom, and ever, can only be placed in the middle positions. All adverbs of place and most adverbs of time should not be placed here. Adverbs of comment can never be placed in the end position. Adverbs of manner can always be placed there, and a few can be placed in the other 2 positions. Let's look at some examples. Consider these sentences with adverbs in the beginning position. Sometimes people make mistakes. Eventually, Bob found his keys. And today, near the ocean, it is foggy. You could also say, near the ocean today, it's foggy. Usually, whichever adverb in a series comes first has more emphasis. Unlike adjectives, you never need to place commas between adverbs. However, placing a comma after adverbs in the beginning position is always an option, and it's recommended when the adverb phrase is longer than 3 words. Note that sometimes is an adverb of frequency. The adverb often can also be placed in the same position. Often we watch movies, but it's usually placed in the middle position. I told you that the adverbs of frequency, always, never, rarely, seldom, cannot be placed in the beginning position. The sentences always we watch movies and never we watch movies and seldom we watch movies are all incorrect. However, with an auxiliary verb, you can say, seldom do we watch movies, or never have we watched so many movies. But why is that? Grammatical rules are based on the relationships between words, and those relationships are based on their meanings. I think the best explanation is that never and seldom are negative adverbials, and like the verb not, they can modify either auxiliaries or a single main verb. The adverb not also cannot be placed in the beginning or end positions. The phrase all the time has a similar meaning to the adverb always, and the adverb constantly is one of its synonyms. We can say we watch movies all the time, or we watch them constantly, but not we watch movies always. Like auxiliary verbs, the adverb always expresses an aspect of possibility, so it must be placed close to the verb in the middle position. The adverb infrequently is similarly a synonym for seldom and rarely. We cannot say, we watch movies seldom. Some native speakers would say, we watch movies seldomly. It sounds better, but the word seldomly is not considered standard English. Adverbs of comment also don't work in the in position. For example, Bob found the keys simply is incorrect. However, in the middle position, simply works fine. Bob simply must find the keys. Again, I think the best explanation is that simply is modifying the modal must here, just as seldom modifies the auxiliary do. Middle position examples of adverbs of degree are he definitely needs a haircut and we almost won the game. We can place almost in the in position when it modifies another adverb. The sentence, we eat there together almost every Tuesday is correct, but we eat there together almost is not. Examples of the secondary middle position are, that gun is just a toy, and I was only joking. Most adverbs of location, direction, and time cannot be placed in the middle position. The adverb now is an exception. We now watch movies every day. Most adverbs of manner also cannot be placed in the middle position, but carefully is an exception. He carefully listened to the teacher. The meaning of an adverb must correspond to some characteristic of a verb, or else it should not be placed anywhere in the sentence. Comparative and superlative adverbs, like adjectives, can be regular or irregular. Some forms for regular adverbs also form regular comparative adjectives. They are one-syllable adverbs that take the er suffix for comparatives and the est suffix for superlatives. Other adverbs need the modifiers more and most and less and least. An example of a regular adverb is late, later, latest. Compare a late lunch with we came late. The latest bus to leave with our bus left the latest. The word the is needed for both these superlative phrases. Note that lately and I have not seen her lately is not a form of late. It's a different adverb and has no comparative forms. We cannot say, I saw him more lately than her. But we can say, I saw him more recently than her. Remember the rule about than forming a conjunction in comparisons and not a preposition. The meaning of the dependent elliptical clause is more recently than I saw her. If we said, I saw him more recently than she, it would mean more recently than she saw him. In the next sentence, only the subjective case can follow than. He was seen more recently than she was. The adjective quick is often mistaken for a regular adverb. We say, riding bikes would be quicker than walking there. But saying he walks quicker than I do, or she eats slower than us, are both errors. Quick is an adjective. Quickly is an adverb. We need to say, he walks more quickly than I do, and I eat less slowly than she does. Adverbial superlatives are often followed by the preposition of. She eats the most slowly of all the students. Of all the buses, ours left the latest. When you look up a verb in a dictionary, some will tell you whether it is transitive or intransitive, or both, and give you examples. Ditransitive and linking are also categories of verbs. A ditransitive verb takes one or two objects and can be in the active or passive voice. Examples are, Bob sold Bill a car, and Bill was given $1,000. A transitive verb takes one object and can be in either the active or passive voice. An example of the active voice is, Bob sells cars. A passive voice example is, The car was sold. It has no object, but the subject car can be an object of the verb sold. An intransitive verb does not take an object and is always in the active voice. Examples are Bob is smiling and Bill has left. Linking verbs are intransitive and always in the active voice. An example is Bob is a good salesman. The word salesman is a noun, but it is not an object. The verb is said to link the noun to the subject. Linking verbs take complements, but they do not take objects. We've seen how different objects can change the meaning of a verb. Remember the examples play cards, play a piano, play the bad guy, and a play. The objects change the meaning of what the verb play represents. Well, some verbs can be complemented by both objects and adjectives. Examples are get your coat and get angry. Smell the coffee and it smells delicious. The different complements change get from representing a physical process to representing an existential process. Smell is a dynamic verb when it takes an object. We can say, she is smelling the coffee, but it's a stative verb when complemented by an adjective. We can't say, the coffee is smelling delicious. Whether a verb has one or two complements can also change its meaning. Compare make a cake with make Bill the boss, or found a dollar with found the class boring. We can say they are considering the offer, but not they are considering the offer generous. The verb consider changes from dynamic to stative when it takes an adjective complement after an object. 15 predicate patterns can be identified based on 5 types of verb complements. The 5 complements are objects, adverbs, adjectives, nouns, and verbals. I mentioned predicate adjectives and predicate nouns in part 2 of this presentation. Now we'll examine them along with predicate adverbs and predicate verbals. Remember that intransitive verbs do not take objects. You can say, we swam a mile, but you can also just say, we swam. The verb to pass is transitive when you say, pass an exam or pass the ball. But when we say time passed, it's intransitive. Linking verbs are also intransitive. There are several linking verbs, but the main one is the verb to be. Consider the statements, Bob is there. Bob is happy. Bob is a salesman. The words happy and salesman are called subject complements. The term is meant to explain that the noun salesman is not an object. The term complement is related to the meaning of words, and the meanings of subject complements are based on the subject and not the linking verb. However, a syntax tree would indicate that a salesman combines with is before the predicate combines with the subject Bob. Yet, you might ask, has a salesman actually complemented the verb is? Is the meaning of is any different from the is in the other 3 sentences? Let's consider some different linking verbs. For example, Bob stays there. Bob seems happy. Bob became a salesman. We cannot use these verbs in Bob stays a salesman, or Bob seems a salesman, or Bob became there. Also think about the preposition in. It is complemented by its objects in the meeting is in an hour. It is in the room next door. And Bob is in a meeting. The first in represents a time relationship. The second, a locational relationship. Space and time are a continuum of existence. You cannot have one without the other. But they are distinctly different. In represents a relationship of experience in the phrase in a meeting. The complements of the verb is are similarly causing it to represent different aspects of existence. I've also mentioned ditransitive verbs which take 2 objects. One object is called the direct object and the other is an indirect object. The indirect object can be changed to a predicate adverb with the preposition to. Compare, I gave Bob a pen and he sent her flowers with, I gave a pen to Bob and he sent flowers to her. The transitive patterns that take predicate adjectives, nouns, and verbals can all be changed to the passive voice. Examples are, he dyed his hair black. His hair was dyed black. They elected Mary president. Mary was elected president. He forced us to leave. We were forced to leave. We've looked at all of these predicate patterns except two. The linking verb example, that is Bob singing, takes a verbal complement after its predicate noun. We will compare it to other predicate verbals in part 5 of this presentation. However, now we are going to take a closer look at verbs that take predicate adverbs as complements. We've seen that some modifying adverbs cannot be placed in the beginning position. This is true of all predicate adverbs. The following sentences are not examples of typical mistakes, but they do illustrate the complementation relationship of predicate adverbs. Let's compare predicate adverbs in the beginning and in positions. You are late. Late you are. My class is on Monday. On Monday, my class is. He looked for the keys. For the keys, he looked. He looks like his father. Like his father, he looks. I showed a photo to her. To her, I showed a photo. I showed her around the studio. Around the studio, I showed her. Note that the prepositions in these verb phrases have affected the meaning of the verbs. Look becomes stative when followed by like. You shouldn't say, he is looking like his father, but he could be looking for his keys. To look and to show are examples of prepositional verbs. The prepositions in their predicate adverbs are either essential or change the meaning of the verb. The word preposition means its position is pre or before another word. Prepositions represent relationships between their complements and the head of a phrase. I've listed 10 different types of relationships here. Note that some prepositions can represent several relationships based on the meanings of their complements. We've seen a couple of examples of prepositional verbs, and here is a longer list. Some are only combined with one preposition and others take two or more. Verbs like depend and rely are not used without their preposition on. Verbs like insist and believe can take a noun clause as an object, but otherwise insist needs its preposition. The verb believe can also take noun objects. However, its meaning changes in they believe him and they believe in him. More examples of prepositions changing the meaning of verbs are care about the price and cares for his grandmother. Where do you come from? And I have come to the conclusion. You can count on him or you can count to 10. You can wait for the bus or you can wait on tables. Sometimes these verbs take objects before their prepositional phrase. Most of the verbs only take one specific preposition. The verb to put can take a variety of locational prepositions without changing its meaning. But we can't use it without a predicate adverb. Put the hat on your head, or in the closet, or by the door. But things must be put somewhere. A few verbs can be used with several prepositions that change their meaning. We've considered to look, which is one of them. Others are to get and to go. Their preposition combinations not only form predicate adverbs, they also form phrasal verbs. Consider the meaning of get around the table and get around the rules. Get behind the wheel and get behind schedule. Get over the fence and get over his ex-girlfriend. Sometimes prepositions form other parts of speech. Just omit the prepositional objects in come in my office and show her around the city, and in and around form adverbs. Come in, show her around. You can look up the stairs, but if you look up an address online, up is not representing a directional relationship. Off similarly represents a directional relationship in fall off a table, but not in call off the game. Notice that we can also say look an address up and call the game off. Phrasal verbs are classified as separable or inseparable. The space in the red underline indicates if it is separable. Pick on me is inseparable. We can't say pick me on. Likewise, you can say he fell for her, but not he fell her for. The words up, off, on, and for are considered particles in these phrasal verbs. They are part of the verb. Particles complement verbs before the phrasal verb is complemented by an object. Can you think of an intransitive phrasal verb? Or do you give up? The word to is similarly classified as a particle in these phrasal modal verbs. Ought to, have to, and is going to. There are thousands of phrasal verbs and about 200 are fairly common. Verb phrases are a complex subject. We will consider non-finite phrases in Part 5, but we need to turn our attention next to the rules and relationships of clauses in Part 4 of this presentation. ColorCodedEnglish.com is a website designed for early readers and ESL students. It offers free apps to learn phonics, vocabulary, and grammar. Please take a look and tell any students you know about it.